So good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Laura Tyson. I've had the honor of being at the University of California, Berkeley Haas School of Business for a very long time. and I once served as dean. The reason I want to bring that up is because GSVC, one of the great events at the Haas School, was started by students while I was dean. I helped them out. I got some money. But I do want to start just with the observation, because a lot of you are students or former students in this room, that many of the very best ideas and very best things we do at the Haas School come from the students. Student ideas about having a competition like this have led to 19 years of competition. And we have this year we have 600 teams, or 580 teams, entries from around the world competing for GSVC prizes. They're coming from 60 countries, and we have 16 partner schools around the globe that actually help us source ideas, help students develop ideas, help students get judges and mentors, help students compete, and then all of this ends up in a final competition this year in Milan, a wonderful city, a wonderful place to visit, and you'll have a wonderful experience there. This is the Western Regional Finals, and we will have today teams competing for the top 2 spots, and then they will be invited to go to the finals in Milan. So that's how the GSVC is organized. And today we also have not just that competition, the regional finals for the Western Division, but we also have a second annual conference. It is a conference on social sector leadership and social venture competitions and social venture formation. It's bringing together the communities to talk to one another about the practice, the learning, and basically to share ideas to further support social ventures both here and all over the world. And by the way, we give a broad definition to social venture. The definition comes from the mission. The mission is to solve a social challenge, a major economic or social challenge, usually one that is not being adequately addressed by the market or by government. But the solution can be a market solution. It can be some of our competitors come up with social venture ideas which are in a for-profit organizational structure. Some of them come up in a non-profit organizational structure. The issue is what's the right sustainable structure to deal with an effective solution to a major challenge that is not currently being addressed. So I just want to point out, we define social venture very broadly. We have with us today some of our sponsors, and I think we're going to have up there. This could not be possible. The best ideas for things at the business school come from students. But the business school itself has to find ways to finance those things. So one of the things I was able to do as dean for the first couple years was to raise some funding from a couple partners to get GSVC going. We now rely on a large number of partners, and those partners make it possible to fund our staff, to help our students. We have a team of 10 MBA students. They have a title on their badge called organizer. I would call them hosts. They're hosts. They're hosts. They also do absolutely play a very active role behind the scenes of keeping our GSVC organized. That's absolutely the case. We wouldn't be able to do it without students. But of course, we have to fund the operation as well, including the prizes. So we do have GSVC prize money. We have a total of $80,000, $40,000 for the first prize, $25,000 for the second prize, $10,000 for the third prize, a People's Choice Award, $2,500, a Quick Pitch Award, $1,000. And I just want to end with a very important, relatively new award, the Prix Memorial Reward. Prix was one of our outstanding social entrepreneurs at Haas. She was a GSVC winner, an early GSVC winner. She started 3 social ventures before her very untimely death at a very young age. She has inspired many, many social entrepreneurs in the Haas community. So we have put together a prize to honor her memory and her legacy and her leadership to all of us. So I won't take up any more of your time. I really just want to thank you all for coming. Thank you all for supporting GSVC. Thank you all for being involved in this. And I think it's really important that we continue to build out GSVC, but also the Social Ventures Conference. So today you're going to have some great speakers and some great workshops. And remember, the goal here, network, learn from one another, think about how you can accelerate your own progress in the social venture world. So thank you very much, and I am going to turn over to a couple of our organizer hosts. So now where are they? Justin and Amar, to give you some of the logistics and details and to introduce our first speaker.
Morning, everybody. So I'm going to give a quick rundown of the schedule for today. Like Laura mentioned, we're going to have 7 teams presenting in the afternoon, but before that, we have a full day of sessions and speakers. So in a few minutes, we're going to have Carolos Orellana, our first keynote speaker. And then after that, we're going to have concurrent sessions on impact investing, and IDEO is hosting a design thinking workshop. If you want to attend the design thinking workshop, you should have received a ticket at registration. If you don't have that, we still have a few spare, and come over to the Wells Fargo room where it's being hosted and you'll be able to get in. But those are first come, first serve. After those sessions finish, we'll be back in here for our next keynote speaker with Lila Jana at noon, and then we'll have a quick break for lunch, and then the teams will be presenting starting at about 2 o'clock. I just want to give a few quick reminders. So you can download the Topi app, which has the schedule as well as interactive Q&A. You can use the meeting code or the event code 2018 to get into our event, and then navigate to each session, and there's an interactive Q&A section that you can submit your questions and vote on other people's questions. At all the sessions in here, we'll try to have Q&A at the end if there's still time. We also have a Twitter hashtag, which is hashtag GSVC2018. And you'll be able to use that to interact with us and keep your eyes peeled, because we'll have photos and maybe some videos from the different sessions throughout the day. A few quick reminders. Please turn off or silence your phones so they're not going off in the middle of sessions. Please avoid entering and exiting the rooms in the middle of sessions whenever possible, particularly in this auditorium. If you need to enter or exit, please use the doors at the top so that the speakers and presenters aren't being distracted. And then finally, we just unfortunately learned there's no water in the faculty building, which is this building. So if you do need to use the facilities or get water, please use the other 2 buildings, either the Chite Hall, which is across the courtyard, or the new Chew building, which is on the other side of the courtyard. All right, and now I'll pass it off to Justin to introduce Carlos.
Awesome, thank you, Amol. And for the water, I recommend Chew. It's really classy, brand new. Go there. So I have the privilege of introducing Carolos Orellana today. He is the co-founder and co-CEO of salaUno, which is a social enterprise based in Mexico, focused on providing more high-quality, affordable, and accessible eye care. Carlos is actually a longtime friend of the Haas School of Business and the GSVC. He graduated from Berkeley Haas with a dual degree in both business administration and public health in 2010, before founding salaUno in 2011, and since then has been not only a good friend of the business school with regards to actually participating in our international business development program, but also is an alum of GSVC himself. And this is his first time back since a semifinal outing, maybe? So welcome him back. Give a big round of applause. Thank you, Carlos.
Good morning. Is this? Yeah. And thank you, Justin, for the kind introduction. And we did get semifinal finish last time, so hopefully this time they'll have better judges, but we'll see. I'm very excited to be here. It's always good to be back at Haas, and thank you to the whole GSVC team for the invitation. I'll tell you a little bit about our story, about what we do, and a few lessons we've learned along the way, mostly directed at entrepreneurs, but I think hopefully also useful for everyone. The story of salaUno starts when my business partner and I were bankers, young bankers, starting our careers in finance. And we're actually doing well, but we were not thrilled about the idea of spending the rest of our lives in finance. And I can always say this in Berkeley because there's not that many bankers. And we were convinced that we could do something where we could combine doing well with by doing good. And that's when we came across a book that would change the course of our careers and our lives. You probably know, a lot of you probably know this book by C.K. Prahalad, and basically what Prahalad states is that if we stop thinking of the poor as victims and start recognizing them as value-conscious consumers, a whole new world of opportunity opens up. And this really struck a chord with us because we thought what he was basically saying is that through business, through enterprise, through profitable, scalable businesses, we could solve some of the biggest problems in the world. And within this book, he talked about the case of Aravind Eye Care System. Aravind is the largest eye care system in the world. They do the most surgeries, more surgeries than any other eye care facility in the world. And they do it through a model that's highly efficient and a model that's highly compassionate. So basically, 60% of their surgeries are free of cost, and those surgeries are subsidized by the other 40% of patients. And the level of efficiency that they have allows them to do that with a profit, and that allows them to keep growing and reinvest and whatnot. So we're both my Javier, my business partner, and I. Oh, he has a copy of the book right here. Both Javier, my business partner, and I are both engineers, and we're both into finance. So we really saw this as an opportunity to use our skills in engineering and finance and apply them to a field that was completely new to us, but that was probably lacking the expertise that we had to make health services more efficient and more accessible and more and higher quality. So we started researching Aravind, and we became really fascinated by the model. And as we dug into it, we came to understand the impact of blindness. And blindness goes far beyond not being able to see. Blindness really affects a person's lives from not being able to work, not being able to provide for their family, from not being able to have a proper quality of life, having to stop doing the things that you like. And finally, and possibly most importantly, it impacts a person's level of independence. So the impact goes far beyond the person who's blind, and it includes or affects his or her family. So it becomes a cycle of poverty that it promotes, because perhaps a grandson or a daughter has to stop working in order to take care of a blind family member. And when we looked at blindness in Mexico, we realized that it was a huge problem that was underserved and underattended. Blindness is the second leading cause of blindness in Mexico, or of disability in Mexico, even though more than 80% of the cases of blindness are either preventable or reversible. So it's a real tragedy. Cataract alone, which cataract is the main cause of blindness, cataract alone affects 2 million people in Mexico. And every year there's about 350,000 new cases, of which about a third get treated. So that backlog is increasing by about 10% every year. If you add to that the population is aging and that the population is one of the most diabetic in the world, this is a problem that's not only big, it's not only growing, but it's growing at an increasing rate. So to understand why all these people aren't getting surgery, we have to look at the population distribution in Mexico. And there's a lot of research that states that a person's willingness and ability to pay for a cataract surgery is about one month's salary. So if we cut the population pyramid of Mexico at $1,000, we get 40% of the population is above that level and 60% is below that level. The reason this is important is that if you look at what private providers for cataract surgery are offering, the lowest price you can get in a private clinic is about $1,000. That means that the other 60% relies on a public system of public hospitals and on NGOs that do some level of free surgeries. The problem with that is that even though there's a lot of good doctors and good hospitals in Mexico, the public hospitals are overwhelmed. So to get a cataract surgery, which usually takes about 15 or 20 minutes and it's it's a quite safe procedure. If you're going to a public hospital, the average wait time for surgery is 10 months, and surgeries and wait times can increase all the way up to 5 years. And if you go to an NGO, well, that's very limited. NGOs do about 5,000 surgeries per year, so compared to the size of the problem, the 2 million backlog and the 350,000 new cases every year, it's a very small amount. Even though the work they do is great, it's a small amount when you look at it at the whole problem. So basically what we had in Mexico, the problem that we seek to address is that sight and taking care of your eyes is a luxury in Mexico. You have to have the right level of income, and you have to live in the right part of town, and you have to have the right level of education to be able to take care of your eyes and to be able to see. And that's a problem we set out to solve. So in 2011, after going through 2.5 years at Haas and going through a GSVC competition, we founded salaUno in 2011 with the purpose of making, and I know this doesn't translate as well from Spanish, but I promise it's stronger. It sounds much stronger in Spanish. But basically our idea was to make eyesight and to make eye care accessible to all. You know, regardless of where you are, regardless of how much you make, you should have access to eye care. And our value proposition, we based it going back to Prahalad's statement that we should see the poor as value-conscious consumers. So we designed our value proposition in a way that's attractive to our population. And basically what we came up with and what we strive to offer is offering a high-quality, affordable, accessible, and friendly service, eye care service. It's important when you look at solving a problem or at addressing a service directed to the poor that you don't fool yourself into thinking that they don't have alternatives. We might not have a competition, we might not have anyone else offering this, but there's always the alternative of not getting the service at all, and that's your main competitor. What we realized is that if we didn't offer a compelling value proposition, patients simply wouldn't seek the service, they simply wouldn't accept treatment. For example, if our care isn't friendly, we might not gain the trust that we need to get from our patients for them to invest a lot of their savings into an eye treatment. So where does salaUno come in terms of affordability? Basically what we do is that we offer a surgery currently for $300, and what that does is that it includes an additional 35% into the population that has access to private care. And what we constantly strive to do is to lower that bar, to lower that price, so that it's accessible to more and more people. So that leaves another 25% that we're not attending, according to this, but we do have programs. First, it's reduced by more than half, but also we have programs where we subsidize, for every 7 surgeries we do at a full cost, we do 1 surgery at 10% of the cost to address that other 25%. Over time, what we seek to do is to simply lower that bar as far as it can go so that from a private, sustainable model, we can address a larger portion of the population. I won't go into detail about what our model looks like, but just very quickly. It all starts with having a high volume of patients. From our purpose, we want to make eye care accessible to all, so of course this implies volume, but also from an operational standpoint and from a sustainability standpoint, we need to be able to attract the high volume of patients. That's where the economies of scale that lower the costs begin. So from a volume standpoint, we have anywhere from online campaigns to eye camps where we go out to communities and do a pre-diagnosis and then bring the patients to our clinics. And then we also have a hub and spoke system where we have 1 main surgical center and 10 spoke clinics where we do a diagnosis, and that makes the initial diagnosis more accessible, and then we can refer them to a surgical center. Right skilling means that every person of our team should be doing only what fully requires our expertise. So basically what we do is that our doctors only do the final diagnosis and they only do the surgery. Everything else is done by assistants, by other personnel that is qualified to do those other parts of the service. Standardization is key to generate those efficiencies from the high volume. Our processes are highly standardized, so that ensures quality and it reduces cost. We leverage technology in everything we do. You'd be surprised, but even though it's a low cost, our services are a low cost clinic, they do look like they're much more expensive than they should be because we use technology to improve the experience and to improve the efficiencies. And finally, I already mentioned that we focus a lot on what the patient feels beyond when he's at our clinics. So just to share a few lessons, and I know these will sound a bit obvious perhaps, but I included these 3 main lessons because I've seen them recurring in conversations with other social entrepreneurs, and I think even though they're obvious, there are mistakes that are commonly made. First is to simply define success and then to manage towards that definition. And what does that mean? Define success. I think when you're in a social enterprise, you have the benefit or you have the opportunity of inspiring your team far beyond just profits towards a much higher purpose. And you have that opportunity. The problem is that when you talk about a double bottom line or a triple bottom line, that can generate confusion with a team. And you're going to attract people, and you need people with different skills and different backgrounds. And to some people, they'll focus on one part of the line more than the other, and others will focus on the other. So in our case, for example, we have our doctors. They're much more focused on the impact side. They're focused on the quality, and they're focused on patient care. They're not interested in talking about profitability or costs or efficiencies. And then you have the finance team and the commercial team, which is the complete opposite. So if you don't have a clear definition of success that everybody shares and that everybody's aligned with and that is simply clear, then you can run into conflict within the organization. And that starts generating problems, and that starts generating a sense that the mission isn't true or isn't genuine. So what I mean by defining success is simply putting it on paper and so that everybody has clarity about it. The way we did it, we defined success in 4 main pillars, and these are the 4 main pillars. Let me share them with you. The first one is commitment. So we said, and this refers to employees, we need a team that's committed to our mission. And this doesn't mean happy employees. It doesn't talk about whether they're feeling good or not. It feels whether they're feeling committed or not. Of course, to be committed, they need to be happy, but we define it as commitment. We put this we used to have this out of our definition of success, and we had it at a lower level. That's something that we saw as important, but not as part of our success. We decided to include it as success because if you're a social enterprise and you're not taking care of your own people, then it generates something that's not congruent. The second part of our definition is service, and this relates to both the clinical quality as well as the experience that I talked about. The third is reach. So it's not enough that we're offering the best quality service or that our patients are happy with the service. We need to make it accessible. And finally is value, and that refers to profitability, to be able to generate enough economical value so that we can keep growing and so we can keep reinvesting, attract new investment, et cetera. So once you put this on the table and you start measuring it, and everybody understands and everybody gets evaluated based on whether we're achieving this, then it creates a lot of alignment within the team. Sorry, this got a bit screwed up, but each one of these needs to be measured. So the way we measure reach, for example, is we have 2 key indicators. One is the number of patients treated, which is pretty obvious. And the second one is the cost per treatment. So everybody in the organization is looking at this indicator and looking at how we can decrease costs, not to generate more profit, but because it's aligned to reaching more patients. The more we can lower the costs per treatment, the more we can make the service accessible and we can reach more people. The second lesson is innovate with a purpose and a path to scale. And this is another very common mistake that companies make, startups make. Innovation is very fun and it's very, it just feels good and it feels exciting and everybody wants to do it and it's sexy and it's valued in new organizations. The problem is that a lot of the time innovation goes nowhere, or at least it doesn't reach its potential. So this is an example. We have virtual reality glasses for patients after they get their diagnosis. The family member can look at what it looks like to have a cataract, for example, or to have glaucoma, or what's going to happen if they don't treat their diabetic retinopathy. So this really creates awareness with a family member who's often the decision maker, and this is a way that we innovate to make or to achieve our purpose. The problem when we first did this is that we got so excited about the innovation, we launched it, we gave it to the counselors, and then we forgot about it and went to the next thing. And about 2 months later, we realized that they weren't using it. And they weren't using it because we hadn't taught them how to use it, because we didn't incorporate it into their counseling methodology, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, it didn't scale until we did those things. So, and to illustrate this point, I like this graph that I took from a book called Innovation and Scaling for Impact. And basically, let me see if I can point this. Basically, a lot of the innovation stays down here, but you have to think of innovation as an investment. When you're innovating, you're investing resources, people's time, people's energy, but that innovation in itself doesn't create benefit until you start going up this path, until you start scaling it and impacting people. That's when you get the return on that investment. But because innovation is so exciting and so sexy, most of it stays down here. And then people forget about it and they go to the next thing. You'd be surprised how much this happened to us. And I'm very sad that we didn't read this book 6 years ago. The last lesson is prepare to be resilient. And don't ask me how you prepare to be resilient, but just go ahead and do it. And this is probably the most important one of all, because you're going to need it. And if you're deciding to go into entrepreneurship, be ready for disaster, be ready for hard times, be ready to have to be resilient. This is what our new hospital, our new surgical hub looks like. And I don't mean to brag, but it's incredible. It's awesome. It's really, it's really great. We spent about 15 months preparing for it. We raised capital, we planned it, we built it. Everything was on time, on schedule, on budget. When we launched in July of last year, everything just seemed to work the way it was designed, or the way it was thought to work. And then this happened 2 months later. The earthquake we had in September 19th, this is not our building is down here, but the building next to us suffered damages from the earthquake, so we had to shut down our new surgical facility. And just to put this in context, we have 11 clinics, 1 surgical facility. All the clinics need the surgical facility to operate because that's where all the surgeries are done. The clinics by themselves can't sustain themselves without being able to refer surgeries. So we had to shut down about 2 months after we opened. Our building was intact, but our neighbor wasn't. And the authorities told us, well, you can't operate because the risk is too high until we demolish it. And we said, we understand. When is that going to happen? Well, there's 250 buildings in the city that need to get demolished, so we can't really tell you. So what I mean by resiliency is getting up from, I know this is sort of an extreme case, and I really hope that this doesn't happen to any of you. And really there was a lot more going on than just our building having to shut down during the time of the earthquake, but just to illustrate the point, being resilient means going from the initial shock where you're just, completely paralyzed by it, to being able to start taking action and start leading your team forward because you have to do that. That's what it means to be resilient. And you might have a resilient team and you might look for resilient people, and we even thought about, should we be looking for people who are resilient when we hire people? But the truth is, your team is only going to be as resilient as your leader is. Even a very resilient team needs a resilient leader to move forward. So it's important that you're, as a leader and as an entrepreneur, you're conscious that you're being looked at to be that resilient leader. In our case, we were lucky enough to, 5 days later, we started our operations in a different facility. We moved stuff out at night, not 100% legally, because the authorities weren't informed that we were taking the equipment out, but we started operations 5 days later. And that really not only saved our company, but it helped our team really get over that initial shock. So just let me leave you with this quote, which I really like. And And with that, I'll finish. And I just wish you the very best with your endeavors. And I wish you the very best with where your stubborn heart takes you. Thank you. Yes. You sit here.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Carlos. I was really inspired by hearing about salaUno, and we have about 20 minutes for some questions we've prepared. If there are any burning questions from the audience, please remember to go into Topi in the next 10 minutes or so and submit those, and we'll try to get them answered as well. So to start off, you mentioned Aravind and a little bit of how you were inspired to start salaUno. Can you talk a little bit more about what sparked that idea initially and how you landed on the current solution?
Well, I talked about a little bit about how we read about Aravind in the book, and I think what really drove us was the full commitment to their mission that they had. If we actually had the chance to go there a couple times, and before we started salaUno, we spent 6 weeks there. And what you can really see, and even though it's intangible, you can really breathe it, is just the commitment that they have, every single person that team has towards eliminating needless blindness. And it's just really inspiring to see that. And also, I think the level of professionalism and the level of quality that they do, every single thing they do, is just inspiring.
Yeah. Fantastic. How did your partnership come about with your co-founder? It sounds like you knew each other for a while beforehand, and maybe your first couple employees. And how did you think about having complementary skill sets and choosing people who could really complement the skills that you bring to salaUno?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things when you're starting a team. Those initial members, and especially if you have a partner doing it, I think choosing your partners is key. In our case, we were both friends, and I think the main thing is that we both shared a similar life aspiration. We both wanted to do something that would help us have a solid career and that we could live from, but also something that would have an impact on our communities. And I think that's about the only thing we have in common if you ever meet Javier. And it's funny, but it actually helps make things work, because that's probably the most important thing. We're completely different from a personality standpoint, from a skill set standpoint, and that often generates a lot of tension. And I think that's fine as long as you can learn to work with that and learn to find ways to make those tensions push you forward instead of push you apart from each other. Yeah. But I think that that philosophy that we both had in common of what we were looking for, not just in our careers but in our lives in general, has been key in making that work. And I think, like any relationship, it's an ongoing thing that you really have to put time and effort into making it work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. At what point did you realize that this was a truly viable idea or startup that would have longevity? And how long would you say did it take you to kind of come to that realization?
Can I tell you when that time comes? Because I don't think it's come yet. I really don't think as an enterprise, I don't think we're there yet. Mm-hmm. I think we've come a long way, but I think we still have a lot to learn and a lot to improve. I think one story I should mention, because it's also related to resilience, but it's also related to viability. When we started, we broke even in 2 months, and we did that because we had an initial contract from one of the NGOs. They gave us a contract for 100 surgeries per month to start with. So from our first month, we were doing that contract. Our second month, we broke even. About 8 months later, we started working with a government program that subsidized cataract surgeries. So we became accredited, and basically we could do as many cataract surgeries as we could, and the government would pay us. They were paying in 45 days, so it was great. We literally had people lined up outside our door, and by 10 a.m. we had to close our clinic every day because we had already been too many people, or more people than we could serve. So things were great. Those were really good problems to have. We were, having to hire more doctors and have to increase our productivity. And then literally from one day to the next, the government said, this program has gotten out of hand, it's gotten out of budget, we need to close it. So they closed the program, and we, from one day to the next, our world completely changed. And we had to focus on that's when we focused on how to make this model stand on its own 2 feet, and how do we make it a more out-of-pocket model. But basically, at that time, we were thinking this model is just going to scale. That's in a straight line, and it was a growing curve. And then from one day to the next, that changed. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is you never know when it's going to be fully viable. Yeah. But you just have to keep adapting.
One of the questions we had was kind of about what you mentioned about the government and any policy or regulation changes. And I'm curious, when you were designing the business model, what did that process look like? How did you think about the impact that policy might have? And were there a lot of iterations of the business model, or did you kind of know what it would look like when you first started?
I guess the reality in Latin America is different from the US and some other countries. And I think I'll talk about Latin America and I'll talk about Mexico, but I think the truth is we didn't think about it enough. And the truth is, I think it's good that we didn't think about it enough, because it's really something you can't rely on, or you shouldn't base your model on. I think working with the government or working with policy is something that you can help to leverage your model and to make it grow faster, and you can't exclude it completely, because it's an important part of the health system, but you shouldn't base the viability of your model on a government contract or on a certain policy, because governments change and policies change.
Is there anything that you would do differently if you could go back and change a decision that you made?
I mean, yes, a lot of things I would do differently. I think the main one, and I mentioned it in some of the lessons learned, but I think the very main one is being clear about our purpose and being smarter about how we align our organization around that purpose. Because in the end, the strength of that purpose and the strength of that common goal that goes beyond profits is what's currently driving the organization. And we could see it, we could feel it in our team, because everyone in our team, or most people in our team, are really there because of that. But we weren't being able to align that team in the right, or with the right clarity, and that was generating conflicts. And not just conflicts, but it was really slowing down the whole project and slowing down people's drive forward. So I think generating that clarity and be able to push everyone in the same direction is something that we could have done better.
Yeah. And when you mentioned being a resilient leader, how do you think about the actions that you take as a leader to kind of influence the culture, especially in a growing organization among your team?
Well, one thing, and I guess it's pretty obvious, but it's something that's one of the most difficult things to do, is that you have to be an optimist. As a leader, you have to have some realism in there. You can't just be fully optimistic, but you have to be an optimist. People can't see you down even when something tragic happens. And I think that's something that, because when you're starting something that's your own, your heart is so deep into it, that it's very difficult to do, because it really hurts when some of these things happen, but you just have to keep pushing forward.
And how have you managed or thought about growth and scaling and the challenges that come along with that?
Yeah, we're very driven towards growth, and for example, this year we currently have 10 diagnostic clinics plus our surgical center, and our growth plan for this year is to open 12 additional clinics. And what we've come to realize is that pushing yourself to grow is okay, but you have to be very conscious about the growing pains as soon as they start to happen. So we've grown very fast over the last couple of years, and we start to feel some of those pains in terms of staff being pushed, in terms of standardization not happening the way we would like it to, and whatnot. So it's important to manage that growth and to have enough, and to make it a part of your strategy to prepare the team for that growth. Otherwise, it starts to deviate, or it starts to take you in a different direction from where you want to go.
Yeah. We just got a question. Have you experienced pushback or skepticism based on the fact that salaUno is for profit? Yes.
And it's a good question. Actually, the whole ophthalmology sector in Mexico hates us pretty much, and And that's changing over time because they're realizing that what we're doing is high quality. But initially, we lowered prices significantly. You know, a consultation with us cost about $2.50 when in a private clinic it cost $80. So, so of course we got pushback in that sense, and we got pushback because we're for profit, and we got pushback because we're not doctors and whatnot. But I think, and we even got pushback internally because a lot of our doctors who joined us were, like I said, were attracted by the mission, and because we weren't clear about how profits play into that, they were a bit confused by that, and with, you know, they were right to be confused. We weren't being clear about it.
Yeah. The next question is, how did you secure initial funding, and what were the challenges there?
Both Javier and I were bankers before this life, so we had some savings, and we basically put all our savings into it. We were very naive in thinking that that was enough, and we were lucky to have that contract that took us to break even in the second month, because that's about as much cash as we had at the time. So initially we started with our own funding, and then about 3 years later we raised an initial round to start building the clinics. And we got a local fund to participate, as well as the IFC, which is part of the World Bank. And then now we have a third fund that joined in the second round that we used to build the hospital.
Oh, great. What was the decision process to leave your role in finance, and how long did that process take?
I don't know. It was a difficult decision, but again, I think being a bit naive about what it would entail, I think helped a little bit. And what I was completely sure about is that I didn't want to pursue a career that was fully focused on myself and focused on making a living.
Yeah.
So I think in the end it was a pretty easy decision. It hasn't been an easy path since then, but.
You talked about this a bit in your presentation, but can you share a little bit more about how you weave the social impact into the company and to the business model, and how you really ensure that that's an integral part of it?
Yeah, I think, you know, I showed this slide with the 4 pieces, and just defining success that way has been very important for us. Initially, we tried to sort of talk about the 2 things, you know, profit and impact, separately in 2 different forums, and just in kind of, you know, depending who we were talking to, we would focus on some indicators within our company. And like I said, that just didn't work, because then when, you know, if I was talking to the finance guy about finances and focusing on finances, and talking to the doctor about patients and service and quality, when we had a meeting with the 2 of them, then, you know, just sparks would fly, and things wouldn't work. And that would generate a certain, you know, a feeling of unease in both of them. Even though in the end, or deep down, they both knew that both things were important, they weren't focusing on both things at the same time, not everyone.
Yeah. Can you share with us a meaningful moment or story where you really felt like salaUno had made an impact? You know,
I think there's so many of them. It's just, I think going back to the decision of leaving finance, I think that's when I really feel that the decision has been right. It's the human element of what we do that makes it really worth it. I think that one of the main stories from early on that I really like is seeing this old lady that she, and it's going to sound like I'm getting sentimental, but really it was a very validating moment for us. This old lady that had come to our clinic about 2 or 3 times. At the time, we had very few patients, so we basically got to see all of them at one point or another. And this lady was, every time she came, she was coming in a wheelchair with her family member, you know, pushing the wheelchair, and she would just not say a word, kept looking down. And she finally, they had been looking for a solution for 5 years, they said. They had Social Security, but they hadn't been able to get the surgery. And she got the surgery, and literally the day after, because they come to get their patch removed and get a revision the day after the surgery, she literally started singing in the middle of the clinic, and we couldn't get her to stop because she was just, you know, it just changed her whole perception of life. So even though it was early on, you know, in the end, that's sort of what it's about.
Yeah, it's amazing. Healthcare is notably difficult as an industry to navigate. Can you speak to the challenges and successes of working in the system?
Yeah, you know, one of our board members is in the restaurant business, and after every board meeting, he just comes up and he says, "I feel so sorry for you. This is so much more complicated than restaurants," and it's true. You know, there's a lot of regulation, and there's a lot of particularities, and you know, both Javier and I, neither one of us are doctors, neither one of us are health experts. I did do an MPH, but you know, but there's a lot more going on than that. So I think one of the key things in terms of making it work and navigating through it is just surrounding yourself with the right people and then trusting them to do what they know how to do best, from regulation to, you know, best practices to the clinical part to the service part, et cetera.
Great. What are your hopes to scale, and how will you balance the risks with the potential positive impacts?
You know, there's a lot more that we can do with eye care, and our model is currently working, and it's you know, I think we're ready to keep scaling, and our initial ambition is to scale to all of Mexico. Right now, we're only in Mexico City, which is, you know, one of the largest cities in the world, so it's a good start, but we want to scale it to the whole country, and eventually perhaps to other countries. But we also want to do, or what we also see in the future is to use the salaUno platform and all we've learned in terms of systems and processes and quality and patient experience and how to attract the volume to replicate it to other specialties. Because we feel that base and what we sort of call it the salaUno way of doing things can be replicated to increase access in other parts of medicine.
Fantastic. How does your approach differ from Aravin's?
You know, I think we still have a very close relationship with Aravind, and we you know, we have consultants from them come to us, and some of our people go to there for training quite often. So we have a very close relationship. I think when we started, we were probably doing things 80% the way Aravind does it, and 20% sort of adapted to Mexico. Mm-hmm. I think right now it's probably inverted completely, because we've had to adjust and we've had to come up with our own ways to improve things. Our model is a bit different in some ways. I think we're a lot more focused on the patient experience, not the quality, but the patient experience than they are, because we found that the patients in Mexico are expecting that. So if you look at our logo and just the way you feel when you walk into a clinic, I think that's something we've innovated quite a bit on.
Yeah, great. So I know we have a lot of founders or future founders in the audience. What 2 or 3 pieces of advice can you share with them when they're thinking about the early stages?
I think the main 2 things, you know, besides the 3 things I discussed, but the main 2 things is, one is make sure that you're really passionate about what it is that you're about to go through, mm-hmm. or go into, and I think it was a slip that I said go through and not go into, but sorry about that. No, and I just think you need to be really passionate about it, because mm-hmm. because you're going to need it, and you're going to enjoy it much more if you're passionate about it. To be honest, I can't think of any single thing other than what I'm doing today that I would be spending my time on. So I think you really need to find that, and if you haven't found it, I think it's fine to say, I'm going to go back to the drawing board, or I'm going to keep looking, but you shouldn't go into it until you're fully passionate about it. And then the second is just the people that you go into it with are obviously the most important. And I think within that, I think the other thing that my partner and I have in common is that we have a very trusting relationship. So mm-hmm. we might disagree on how to do things, we might have different styles and different priorities or whatnot, but there's that trust that's just there, and that's not in question. And I think that's very, very important.
Yeah. And just one last question in terms of seeking out mentors or people to guide you along this journey. What did that look like for your experience? How did you find those people, and how have they supported you?
We've had a lot of people that helped us along the way in different capacities, and I think more than looking for mentors is my advice is just talk to anyone who listens to you, and talk about it as much as they'll stand. I think that it just helped us a lot in the beginning. On the one hand, to help our ideas, become clear. On the second point, it opens a lot of doors, and I think thirdly, just psychologically, you start believing it yourself. The first time you say it, you're sort of, I don't know what I'm talking about. By the 10th time you say it, it's almost a reality.
Yeah.
So I think really talking about it, and a lot of people are scared a bit or worried about their ideas getting stolen or whatnot. And I think that's just the wrong way to go about it. If somebody else steals your idea, then you should have done it faster yourself. But I think the benefit and the upside is much higher from sharing your ideas and being open about it than from trying to keep them private.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is such an inspiring story to get to hear about, and we're so happy you could join us here at GSVC.
Thank you.
Thank you.